A scream cut across the quiet of rural Decatur County just after sunrise, and by the time the sound fell away, Holly Bobo was gone. A nursing student in a close-knit Tennessee community, Holly stepped out into an ordinary April morning in 2011 and vanished from the edge of her own backyard. Within hours, neighbors and strangers were fanning through fields and timber, pink lunch pail on missing person flyers, prayer circles rising with the drone of helicopters. What followed was a years-long search for truth. Arrests and a high-profile trial, a verdict many took as closure, and then, years later, new interviews and a dramatic recantation that reopened old doubts and fresh debate about what justice really looks like. This is not a ghost story. It's a record of choices, timelines, and testimony. We'll trace the morning minute by minute, sift what investigators knew versus what they only thought they knew, map the competing narratives, and apply a clear, simple razor to a tangle of claims. Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we rebuild the day, test every theory, and determine what most likely happened to Holly Bobo. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there. On April 13, 2011, the Bobo family woke up to an ordinary day in Darden, Tennessee. Holly Bobo, 20, had an exam that morning. She got up early to study while her mother, Karen Bobo, packed her lunch. Around 7:40 a.m., a neighbor leaving for work heard a piercing scream from the Bobo property. She called Karen at her job to report it. At home, Holly's brother, Clint, 25, was still asleep. The barking dog woke him about 10 minutes later. Clint looked outside and saw Holly kneeling near the carport beside a man in camouflage. Believing it was Holly's boyfriend, Drew Scott, an avid turkey hunter, Clint didn't act immediately. He even texted his mom, "Does Holly not have school today?" Karen knew Drew was miles away hunting. When Clint described the man, she panicked. "That's not Drew," she told him over the phone. "Get a gun and shoot him." Clint armed himself and looked again. This time, Holly and the man were walking toward the woods on a familiar trail. She was upright, but the sight alarmed him. At 7:55 a.m., Karen dialed 911 from work. "Somebody has my daughter," she said. "A man in full camouflage has got Holly." The call first reached the wrong county, causing confusion. By the time officers were dispatched, Clint had found blood near Holly's car. A neighbor's mother drove up to confirm that screams had been heard. Clint placed his own 911 call around 8. By 8:10, the first deputy arrived. Holly was gone. The search began immediately. Within hours, hundreds of volunteers joined law enforcement in one of Tennessee's largest manhunts. Friends and strangers scoured the woods, back roads, and fields. Karen made an emotional plea on television. "Holly, I love you so much. Please try to get home to us, and if anybody knows anything, please help us find her." The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, and federal agencies set up a command center. Searchers soon found Holly's belongings scattered along a road. Her cell phone, pink lunchbox, notebooks, and papers. The trail headed north from the Bobo home. But Holly herself was nowhere to be found. Back at the property, the only physical clue was the blood near her car. Investigators, as is common, looked first at the family. Clint came under scrutiny. Why hadn't he acted sooner? Why had he only called 911 after 8 o'clock? Rumors spread in the community. Clint sat through hours of interrogation by TBI, FBI, and U.S. Marshals. He never changed his story. Phone records supported him. Holly's phone was tracked moving away from the house, while Clint's remained at home. "I never ever found Clint to be dishonest," one investigator later said. Authorities publicly cleared Clint, the rest of the family, and Drew Scott within weeks. Despite this, the investigation stalled. Through 2011 and 2012, TBI agents pursued dozens of leads, but found nothing solid. Holly's parents hired private investigator Sheila Wazocki and her team. They zeroed in on 4 local men with reputations for drugs and petty crime: Zach Adams, Dylan Adams, Jason Autry, and Shane Austin. Locals had whispered their names since early on, and the PIs noticed they often gave each other alibis. By late 2012, they sat at the top of the PI team's suspect list. The official investigation, however, looked elsewhere. For a time, the prime suspect was Terry Britt, a convicted offender with a history of abducting women. He matched Clint's description of the man in camouflage. Under TBI agent Terry Dicus, Britt's home was bugged, an unprecedented step in Tennessee. His vehicles and property were searched, but months of surveillance brought no evidence. His wife gave him an alibi for the morning Holly disappeared. By 2013, Britt was officially cleared. A TBI agent later admitted, "We made mistakes. I will take that to the grave." In early 2014, the case broke open. Dylan Adams, arrested on a separate weapons charge, suddenly mentioned Holly during questioning. On September 17th, in a taped interview, Dylan told investigators that he, his brother Zach, their friend Jason Autry, and their cousin Shane Austin were involved in her abduction. His account was thin and confused. His mother later said detectives pressured him, calling her son bullied into saying something he didn't do. Still, it was the first time anyone had directly named suspects. The state moved fast. On February 28, 2014, police searched Zach Adams' home. A week later, a grand jury indicted him for kidnapping and murder. In April, Jason Autry was charged with the same counts. Shane Austin had agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity, but the deal collapsed. In February 2015, before he could be indicted, Austin decided to end it. That May, Dylan was charged with kidnapping, rape, and murder. Prosecutors announced they would pursue the death penalty against Zach. Just days before Dylan's taped confession, 2 ginseng hunters made a grim discovery. In woods off County Corner Road, about 20 miles from the Bobo home, they found human remains, including a skull, later identified as Holly's. The skull showed a gunshot wound to the head. For the family, it was devastating confirmation. It wasn't the outcome we wanted, but we were thankful to finally bring her home, Karen said. Zach Adams went to trial in September 2017. The venue was moved to Hardin County because of the case's publicity. By then, Jason Autry had become the state's star witness. After insisting on his innocence for years, he struck a deal in 2016 to testify against Zach in exchange for leniency. On the stand, Autry described April 13th in detail. He claimed Zach, Dylan, and Shane abducted Holly and took her to Zach's home. Later that morning, he said, Zach asked him to help bury this body. Autry testified that he accompanied Zach to a spot by the Tennessee River. When they laid Holly down, she was still alive. Zach then pulled a pistol and shot her in the head. Spooked by a boat engine nearby, they loaded her body back into the truck and left. The story was dramatic. Holly's family said it felt believable, but under cross-examination, cracks appeared. Phone records showed Autry was on calls with his girlfriend and mother around the time he claimed the shooting happened. He admitted his timing might not be exact. He also mentioned a burn barrel and a fence at Shane's home that didn't exist at that time. Prosecutors never fully explained who abducted Holly from the carport or how her remains ended up in the woods. The case leaned heavily on Autry's testimony. Supporting him was Rebecca Earp, Zach's former girlfriend. She testified that days after Holly vanished, Zach threatened her. He told her he would tie her up just like he did Holly Bobo. She also recalled Zach saying Holly would never be found. In another instance, he hinted about having her remains in a bucket, then claimed he meant meth remnants. While the defense questioned her changing story, her words painted Zach as a man bragging about what he had done. After 2 weeks of testimony from over 50 witnesses, the jury deliberated for 11 hours. On September 22, 2017, they convicted Zach Adams on all charges. To avoid the death penalty, he accepted life without parole plus 50 years. At sentencing, Karen Bobo told him he showed absolutely no remorse. Zach insisted, "She don't realize I'm not that person." In January 2018, Dylan Adams entered an Alford plea to facilitation of murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 35 years without parole. His attorneys read a statement confirming that neither Holly nor Clint knew the Adams brothers beforehand, quashing lingering rumors. "No one is happy about this," the judge said, "but at least we avoid a lengthy emotional trial." Karen agreed, "Just letting one more chapter be behind us." Jason Autry followed in July 2020. He pleaded guilty to lesser charges and, with time already served, was released. A lawman remarked, "The state had to make a deal with the devil to get Zach Adams prosecuted." Holly's father said the family understood the trade. "We wanted justice for Holly, and I feel like that happened." The case reignited in 2022. Zach's new legal team revealed that Autry had recanted. In an interview with defense-hired psychologist Dr. Katie Spurko, Autry admitted he had lied on the stand. He said he built his story from case files and phone records to avoid the death penalty. "Coming back knowing that you just lied, that's the worst I've ever felt in my life," he told her. Spurko believed his remorse was genuine. The defense also stressed that Clint's description of the abductor, about 5'10", 200 pounds, didn't match Zach or Autry, who were both much taller. A new witness claimed she saw Terry Britt in his truck that morning, leaning as if to hide someone. Prosecutors dismissed these claims. They said Autry's recantation wasn't credible and the jurors had already seen his flaws. Key parts of his story matched facts. Holly's skull had a bullet hole, and her items were found along a route tied to the suspects. Brett's alibi still stood. In April 2024, a judge reviewed the new evidence to decide whether the case should be reopened. When Holly vanished, explanations poured in. Some came from investigators, others from neighbors, and many from internet sleuths. Over the years, 4 main ideas gained traction. Each offers a different version of events. Theory 1. A family member or boyfriend was involved. In the immediate aftermath, suspicion turned toward those closest to Holly. Clint Bobo was the only eyewitness, and people questioned his hesitation. Why hadn't he rushed outside when he saw a man leading his sister into the woods? Why wait to call 911 until almost 8 a.m.? Online, strangers asked the same questions. Clint later recalled being accused outright. "If I had been that brother, I would have." Holly's boyfriend, Drew Scott, also fell under suspicion. Clint had first thought the man in camouflage was Drew, but Drew was turkey hunting an hour away that morning. His alibi was airtight. Law enforcement pulled phone records and interrogated Clint for hours. The data showed Holly's phone moving away from the house, while Clint stayed put. "I never ever found Clint to be dishonest," one investigator said. Within weeks, the TBI publicly cleared Clint, Drew, and all family members. This theory was discarded almost as quickly as it appeared. Theory 2. The lone predator. Another idea was that Holly fell victim to a single offender. The leading name here was Terry Britt, a convicted sex offender who lived nearby. He matched Clint's description of the man in camouflage, and had a troubling history of abducting women. Former TBI agent Terry Dykers was convinced Britt was the answer. Under his direction, the state bugged Britt's home, an unprecedented move, and searched his property extensively. Neighbors whispered that Britt had cut his hair short right after Holly disappeared, possibly to alter his appearance. But months of surveillance produced nothing. Britt's wife gave him an alibi for the morning of April 13th. No physical evidence tied him to Holly. By 2013, Britt was officially cleared. Still, some sleuths and even professionals argue the case makes more sense with one predator than with a more elaborate scenario. For them, Britt remains the most plausible option. Theory 3. Wrong men convicted. Years after the trial, a very different theory surfaced, that the people convicted in connection to Holly's death weren't responsible at all. This view rests largely on Jason Autry's 2022 recantation. In an interview, Autry admitted that the story he told on a witness stand was fabricated. He said he pieced it together from case files and phone records to save himself from a death sentence. Coming back knowing that you just lied, that's the worst I've ever felt in my life, he confessed. Supporters of this theory point to Dylan Adams, who has learning disabilities and may have been pressured into naming names during interrogation. They argue that without Autry's testimony and Dylan's statements, the case against those convicted collapses. A new witness has even claimed she saw Terry Britt acting suspiciously in his truck on the morning Holly disappeared, leaning as though hiding someone in the passenger seat. Prosecutors reject this narrative. They argue that jurors already knew Autry's credibility was shaky, yet still found enough evidence to convict. They also stress that Britt was investigated and cleared years earlier. Officially, the convictions stand, but the recantation theory has reopened debate, especially online, where many wonder if the justice system locked up the wrong men. Theory 4. The prosecution's case. There is also the version that played out in court, which led to convictions. And despite some weaknesses, we think law enforcement got it right this time. From the first scream at sunrise to the contested testimony years later, the Holly Bobo case unfolded in waves. Swift action, long silences, dramatic courtroom moments, and lingering doubt. The search for answers around Holly Bobo's disappearance has produced many competing stories. But when we apply Occam's razor, choosing the explanation that requires the fewest assumptions, one version stands above the rest. The early suspicion of Clint Bobo or Drew Scott doesn't hold. Clint's phone records anchored him at home. Drew was out hunting. Law enforcement cleared both within weeks. The lone predator theory, focused on Terry Britt, has an attractive simplicity. Britt fit Clint's description and had a disturbing record. Yet after unprecedented surveillance and repeated searches, investigators found nothing. To accept Britt as the culprit means believing every trace of evidence slipped through the cracks, an unlikely scenario given the scrutiny. The wrongful conviction argument rests on Jason Autry's recantation years later, but that puts us in a bind. Either he lied in court, or he lied afterward. His sworn testimony contained details only confirmed later, like the gunshot to Holly's head. His recantation, by contrast, came after he had already secured his freedom. That timing makes it less persuasive. What remains is the account that ultimately convinced a jury, the prosecution's version. According to this explanation, Holly was abducted by at least one man, the figure in camouflage that Clint saw from inside the house. But the crime did not end there. Evidence suggests she was taken to Zach Adams' home, where others became involved. In 2014, Dylan Adams named his brother, Autry, and Shane Austin as participants. Autry later testified that Zach shot Holly near the Tennessee River, and Zach's own girlfriend remembered him making threats in the days after, that he would tie her up just like he did Holly, and that Holly would never be found. This version fits the available evidence. Holly's belongings were found along a road leading towards the Adams brothers' homes. Her remains were discovered near property tied to Zach's family. And while Clint saw only one man leading Holly away, that doesn't exclude others joining in later. It simply shows the abduction began with one person, then escalated once Holly was out of sight. It is not a perfect picture. No DNA tied the men directly to Holly. Autry's testimony was flawed, but the alternative theories require us to believe more, that confessions were entirely fabricated, that threats Zach made were meaningless, and that another suspect escaped notice despite exhaustive investigation. By comparison, the courtroom version demands fewer leaps. So what most likely happened? Holly was forced from her driveway by a single man in camouflage. She was taken to Zach Adams' property, where others joined. There she was held against her will, and when the manhunt intensified, she was moved toward the river. Realizing she was still alive, Zach shot her. Her body was later abandoned in nearby woods, where hunters found it 3 years later. For Holly's family, this outcome is devastating, but clear enough to bring a measure of closure. As her mother said in court, the goal was to get justice for Holly, and I feel like that happened. The truth may never be known in every detail, but the simplest and most consistent explanation is that Holly was taken by men she barely knew, and that she died because of their actions. Holly Bobo's case is remembered not only for its tragedy, but for the determination of those who refused to stop searching. Neighbors, volunteers, investigators, and her family carried the weight of uncertainty for years before answers came. The truth, as best as it can be known, is painful in its simplicity. Holly's life was stolen by men from her own community. Her story stands as a reminder that danger can appear close to home, and that justice, though imperfect, depends on persistence. Holly's legacy lives on in the love of her family and the resolve of a community that never forgot her.